Mmm.
Hi, and welcome back for a special Hot Off the Press. Tonight, we are entering the world of Valdemar and the world's Mercedes Lackey, and we're here to talk about a new upcoming anthology. I'm your host, Jim Nettles, and so let's see who is all bringing in their pieces for this particular collection. Jeannie, you're up first.
Oh, hello, everybody. I'm Jeanne Adams. I write urban fantasy, paranormal romantic suspense, and space adventure with my friend Nancy Northcott, and I am a longtime Mercedes Lackey fan.
Paige?
I'm Paige L. Christie. I write feminist westerns with dragons, contemporary fantasy, somehow usually revolving around food. I don't know. And pretty much anything else that strikes my fancy. And I got hooked on Mercedes Lackey in my early teens and very excited to be here.
Diana?
I write fantasy with pagan themes, historical settings if possible, and my Westria series, which is what's supposed to be an alternative future, mostly set in California and the West Coast.
Stephanie?
I've been a Mercedes Lackey fan since my teens. I've been writing for the Valdemar Anthologies since the first one back in 1997, with an unbroken streak. Yay! I am a game developer, and I write fantasy as time and my children permit.
Louisa?
Hey, I'm Louisa Swann, and I have also been a Mercedes Lackey fan since probably my teens, which is too long ago to really remember. I write fantasy, science fiction, mysteries and thrillers, and steampunk, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the rest of the panel goes. Thank you.
And Phaedra?
Let's see. All right. Urban fantasy. All right. Dark fantasy. I've written gaming fiction. I worked on games. A lot of short stories. Done shared worlds like Star Trek, Eureka, Battletech, Shadowrun. And let's see. I have, like everybody else, I fell in love with Mercedes Lackey's work, especially the Valdemar series, when I was young, and my first crush was Vanielle. Completely. I don't know if it was the covers of the books or because I kept thinking of Michael Paré, but yes, I mean, ever since. And when I found out there was an anthology and I found out it was John Helfer's, I contacted him as soon as I could and said, "Can I write for that too?" And he said, yes.
Well, let's actually dive into this a little bit about everybody and where you got your start with Mercedes Lackey and especially the Valdemar universe. So, Jeannie, I'll throw that to you first.
Oh my gosh, I was working in a Barnes & Noble, the now defunct and long disappeared Barnes & Noble. And actually, I'm sorry, B. Dalton's, long defunct, and Barnes & Noble still exists.
Wow.
And yeah, there's a blast from the past, right? B. Dalton.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, I don't know, high school, I guess. And I was shelving books, and I came upon this cool cover for Arrows of the Queen, I think is the first one. And I thought, this looks good. Lunch hour, 15-minute break in the back. I'm halfway through the book and thinking, guess I better buy it. So I took that first one home and awaited each segment with bated breath. Really pretty much from that point, I have loved everything about the Valdemar series. I like her other books too, a lot. But that's the that's the one I go back to, and those are the rereads and the comfort reads. But it started with that very first one, and that was my section. Anybody who's ever worked in a bookstore, they assign you a section, and usually the new person gets assigned the one that gets the most traffic. The romance section and the science fiction and fantasy section always have the books all cattywampus because people are like rifling through them and stuff. So as the newbie, I got handed, I'm like, great. I get to see all the new stuff.
Paige?
Oh, well, I actually got started with Mercedes Lackey in the Diana Treguard mysteries.
Love those.
Oh my
Yes.
God, I love those books. And then from there found my way into Valdemar and just haven't stopped since. So yeah, just her humor and her, sense of character development, and she's just so much fun to read. And yeah, I've been hooked for a long, long time.
Diana?
Well, I first discovered Mercedes when she was submitting to Marion Zimmer Bradley's Sword and Sorceresses magazines way back when. Where did this woman come from? This is great stuff. Living in Berkeley, and Marion was effectively my sister-in-law, so I was in on all that from the beginning. And so she and I were beginning to make our mark about the same time. But when she started, especially with the first novel, she was suddenly, to this major explosion of magic. And I was also frankly envious because she had, with the companions, she had hit upon the most absolutely brilliant invention that a whole major swath of readers just went for. It was I stood in awe of and then when she started dealing with gay characters, that was the second Marion had done that too, but not a lot of other people were doing it, especially in fantasy. And that too was a brilliant and worthwhile thing to do. And of course, they're damn good reads. That wasn't an F word. I can have a damn. All of her books are worthwhile. I had, in fact, just this past year, I had missed out on a lot of the Elemental book novels, despite the fact that I had contributed to the Elemental anthologies for a while. And ended up having to go down to Change of Hobbit, or for to pick up the ones that I did not find. And then I was honored when she asked me to contribute to the Valdemar, and I've participated in a lot of shared world anthologies, the Thieves' World, and I forget how many others. And you always have to try to work your way into it and figure out, okay, where is my little corner of this going to be? And because of all of those shared world anthologies, I've ended up kind of writing novels in chapters. Each short story advances the story. So I'm looking at this, and in Valdemar, becoming a herald and acquiring a companion, or maybe acquiring a companion and then becoming a herald, is the great glorious goal. Okay, so there must be people, and I think has been demonstrated by the anthologies, with all of everybody here's writing, finding places in Valdemar that are not the classic central storyline. Mm-hmm. Although it is hard, as I found in Thieves' World, where I'd started with what was supposed to be an ordinary person trying to survive in Thieves' World, by the time they stopped, he had somehow acquired a number of magical abilities. And I started with a character who was a weaver, and she's now married to a herald. So we'll see where this goes.
Stephanie, how about you? What was your introduction?
Oh, it was definitely a B. Dalton or a Walden Books in a mall somewhere. It was definitely that cover of Talia on Arrow's the Queen. And in the back was that little blurb for the Queen's own fandom, which was run by Judith Luvis, and there was another person, Sally. Yeah. I'm blanking on her name, but I'm still friends with Judith. We're Facebook friends, and we still every now and then ping each other. And that was really, I wrote in the, it's funny because I got published first and then I wrote in the fan fiction little journals that people published. So I did the reverse of what most people do. But that was my route. I was this awkward 13-year-old who just loved fantasy fiction, and at the time that was mostly like Wrinkle in Time or reading a lot of Greek mythology books or Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. And then suddenly I just found all these DAW paperbacks, and Misty's was one of them. And at that moment, they had published all the Arrows books, and I literally went and bought them all with my allowance money. So, and I think the 1,000 Honors books had also come out. So I just devoured them all.
Lisa?
Oh my, I'm hearing everybody remembering their first books, and I cannot for the life of me remember which was first. But I know that what caught my attention was the whole relationship between the companions and their heralds, and that whole interaction between the different species, and the way Mercedes Lackey can just grab a gentle subject and gentle, apparently, characters and weave them into a story that had me awake until I finished it. I wouldn't put down one of her books until I'd read it cover to cover so many times. And I've reread several of them. And I just totally am enthralled by the world. As far as going into the anthologies, I was fortunate to be in a workshop where John Hilfers was present, and he started talking about people who have, authors who have actually read Valdemar and Elemental at that time, and said that he was looking for some authors. Possibly they were going to start up the anthologies again. And so I got on the list and was fortunate and just so excited. I'm still excited and thrilled every time I get a story accepted into the anthology and it comes out. So now it's been 9 for me. I haven't been since the beginning, but it's been 9. So I'm totally thrilled.
Phaedra, how about you?
It was a B. Dalton and at the Macon Mall. I was looking for the latest in the Dragon Riders of Pern. And that is when I saw Magic's Price. At least I think that was the first one. And I saw the cover and I was like, oh, and the idea of the fact, because I was already in Dragon Riders of Pern, so I wanted to, this looked really good. So I turned it over and I did the same thing. I started reading it while I'm staying there waiting on my mom because she was out shopping. She said, here, you stay in the bookstore. I'm going to go shopping. So that's where I was. Wound up sitting in the floor on the carpet because there was carpet in them back then and read like a good quarter into it. And I got up and I walked to the front and she goes, I guess we're getting that. And I said, yes, we are. Yeah, this is it. This is all I want. I just want this book. And later on, it was getting into the Dinah Tragardi series and then the Serrated Edge, because I loved Tannum Drake, the whole concept of elves racing cars, which are actually elven steeds. I mean, what concept? I loved it. It was so good. And I haven't put anything down she's ever read yet. I mean, she's ever written yet. I love everything she does. And you already know how I did. I beg John, let me in, please.
Well, let's actually start talking a little bit about the stories. I mean, and what is it because when you get to come into a shared world, especially one you already know and love, right? You get to bring your own piece, your own story, and your own view to it. So, Paige, tell us a little bit about what your story is you're bringing in for the anthology.
Well, I came in and I looked at, well, I fell into the anthologies. I was at Dragon Con and I was sitting with Jenny Wirtz and Don Mates chit-chatting and helping them with their booth. And John walked up, John Helfers, and was asking Janny something. And Janny pointed to me and said, "By the way, John, this is Paige. She can write." And John said, "Do you like Valdemar?" And I said, "Yes." And he's like, "Send me an email." So that's how I tripped and fell into the anthologies. And I looked at it, and it had been a while since I had read Valdemar in depth. And so I went back and I reread a bunch of stuff, and I thought to myself, there's so much that's been written in these anthologies by other people, and there's so many layers, and I don't want to do heralds and companions. I want to go someplace that I have not seen in these books. And so I wrote a girl with no powers. And I've done 4 stories with her now as a lead or co-lead in the case of one of them. With a girl whose ambition is actually to wear the blue instead of the white, to be a palace guard. That is her goal. Her goal is to be, in that space and not have a companion and not worry about and not have magic and not have any of that. She is an ordinary person with a much more ordinary goal. But she's got all these personal issues that prevent her from doing that. And so she has to figure that out. So for the first time in my life, I found myself actually writing what was equivalent of mysteries, which I don't usually do, but all of her little stories are mysteries that she has to solve through wits and cleverness, so that she can earn her way toward her goal. So that's what I've been doing for the last 4. I think this is the 4th one. Yeah.
Diana, how about you? Tell us a little bit about this contribution.
Well, it was kind of in an odd way more of a challenge, because since I had started from the premise of I'm going to write about somebody who is ordinary and doesn't have magic, and the premise of the anthology was, okay, they have a problem and they solve them, and it's not by magic. So in one way, okay, this should be perfect for what I'm already doing, but the magic is what one of the major attractions of Valdemar. So, how are we going to make all this work? And also, there was in some ways, the previous story had been more ordinary, working things out. So then I realized, okay, I had gotten at the end of the previous story, was when my character Dira got together with Andres, who was in heraldic training, and nobly as she thought gave him up to the heralds. They had been intending to go off and reclaim his farm before he got chosen, in a bang up, I thought, scene at the end of my story. Well, now there they are, and he gets a letter from home saying, you need to come and deal with your property. There's a problem. So sort of as a test of, does he really want to be a herald? And does he really want to forever give up on going back and being a farmer? He has to make this journey. And she says, I'm going with you. And they're taking the journey to work out those aspects of the relationship, especially in terms of being a herald is obviously going to be his primary thing. He maybe they can have a marriage, but it will never be. The marriage will always have to take second place, and she has to understand that and accept it. And then there's the fact that you're in love with somebody and they have this other relationship with this perfect being. And in this particular case, the perfect being is a teenager, a teenage companion, who probably got matched up with Andres, who is almost 40 in hopes that he could settle him down. So she has to figure out what is her relationship to the companion going to be. So I think that this has a lot of potential for further development. By the end of the story, she and the companion are working together. And they manage to, except they're not using companion magic aside from communicating, and they're finding a way to communicate. The conclusion is helped by her non-heraldic insight into the situation. So that was how I solved that particular challenge. So I will be very interested in knowing what the theme of the next anthology is going to be, and so that I have more time to try to figure out, okay, where are they going next? And I wanted to say one of the reasons that I've been so enthusiastic about working in the Valdemar environment is every time I go back poking through the various books for insight and ideas, and I am impressed by no one true way as the basis for a culture, the basic premises of the culture. I've currently been working a lot with trying to reclaim and re-energize American symbols as the high ideals they were originally intended to represent. And I can see in Valdemar, Misty working with some of the same kinds of concepts of what are the images, what are the morals, what are the I'm not going to use the P word, but as a system, Valdemar is admirable.
Stephanie, how about you? Let's hear a little bit about your contribution.
So for me, it's a little bit of I decided I wanted to write about a bard because I wanted a book about a bard, and there wasn't one, and that was a wish fulfillment. Now I haven't continued writing about her. I actually went on to write about a herald because I also wanted to write about a herald. So I guess I moved on, but I had actually been asked, hey, make sure that whatever you're writing about can go on for several stories. And I ultimately ended up pitching something to John Helfers. And what I pitched was, what about Lone Wolf and Cub, but it's just in Valdemar? And he was like, yeah, that sounds great. So that's what I did for a little while. And then that has shifted as well. A lot of times I find when I am writing these stories, I am working through something usually pretty big, like something going on in the world, and I use the story to work through it. Like, say, an invasion of a country, or maybe we're all being isolated at home for some reason. And that's what The Ghost of the High Hills was. You can find threads of that in there. Or maybe there is a group of people who is being treated unfairly, in my opinion. And so I write a story about that, and that's what All Around the Bell Tower was. I don't like shove it in people's face, but I use that as an impetus to write my way through it. And I think Valdemar is a great setting for that particular, I guess, emotional work. So yeah, and to be honest, the bard was I was originally asked to write a story. I was like, I have no ideas. I'm just going to write a total Mary Sue. And then she ended up not being a Mary Sue. She went off and did her own thing. And then I ended up no spoilers, but I killed her off. And, she was a great character and I loved her, but she lived her life and she's done now. So. And I something that Diana said earlier, I have a map of Valdemar. I've had 2 maps of Valdemar, by the way. I have a map of Valdemar, and I always go and I look at it and I go, where haven't I read a story about yet? where can I go that we haven't gone yet, that I can fill in the gaps? And that's what I end up doing. And I try to like think my way. I try to put myself in Misty's boots and walk around. And that's what I end up doing. That's kind of what I try to do, because I try to kind of walk in her voice. I try. I know I can't, but I try when I'm writing the stories.
I've done a map of Haven if anybody's interested.
All of the above.
It's a great map.
Me share.
So, Louisa, tell us a little bit about your piece.
So the current story, it's the third time this character has appeared. And Rena started off, it has a very interesting source for this character. I was listening and reading Jim Butcher's, can I say another author's name?
Sure.
Jim Butcher's Cinder Spires, the very first one. And there is a character in there who she's just wild and crazy, though she's a very gentle soul. So she wears all kinds of colors and rainbows and ribbons and all kinds of different materials as part of that's her everyday wear. I was captivated by that character. And when it came time to create a new character for Valdemar, I had decided I wanted to do something with that type of character. Somebody who, she didn't do it on purpose. It wasn't because she was kind of a little bit crazy and out there. It was because this was her disguise. Her disguise was being crazy and kind of out there because she had the gift of foresight, and she lived in Kars, and she was afraid if they found out she had the gift, she was young enough, they would just, and even if she was older, they would just burn her, and she did not want to be burned. Her big fear was being burned. So this character has gone through several adventures, and this is I believe it's her third appearance, and she ends up in a situation where the foresight does her no good because it's just disappeared. She's basically fallen into a hole in the ground and ended up in an underground river, and she has to escape. And in order to do this, she has to rely on her own strengths and her own fortitude to figure out how to get out of this mess. So that's basically it in a nutshell. And I actually am so in love with this character. She's so much fun to write.
Phaedra?
I feel like I missed out. I haven't continued a character at all in any of them. It's been a completely new character, a new story every time.
You have a challenge now.
I do. I knew I like this because in this one, because you see that when you get the summary of what she wants it to be about, well, first thing you already start thinking about the pitches and everything. So and I was always taught that, well, you write the first 4 down and you throw them away, and then 5, 6, and 7 might be the best ones. Because I always try to send in multiples at one time. But when I read it, the first one is the one I wanted. I want to do this one. So I kept that one and stuck it in with 6, 7, and 8. And she picked that, and that was the one that got picked. So I was happy because it was like, I think it was the way Paige said that the whole thing about it is about, getting a companion and being a herald and the special of all that is and the magic of it. But what about the basics before they were a herald? The basics of magic in the everyday life, of just surviving, of growing, of I took it as being it's basically about a young boy who's a blacksmith and he's very good at it, but he wants to be a herald. That's what he wants. He wants a companion. He wants the magic horse. He wants the magic, and he wants to be able to travel around and see all of Valdemar. And he wants to see Kars and everything else. And then he meets a herald and asks that herald to take him with him back to Collegium. And the herald's like, why? Why would you want to do that? You have this beautiful ability. It's like, no, this is boring. I want to go somewhere else. He's like, well, then I will let me stay and I'll teach you how to be a herald here in your village. But it's not about magic. He doesn't use any magic whatsoever to teach him what it's like to live on the road, to live on the land, to live by your wits, and the magic of just simply the rising of the sun and the setting of the sun. And I love that idea. I think out of all of them, I think this has been my favorite. And now I want to write that character again. And it's like, oh, I can. I was like, great. It never dawned on me to write a continuous character. I love it.
Yeah, if you don't kill them off, or
Well,
sometimes you can kill them off. But
well, you know, sometimes you have to kill your darlings.
Jeannie?
Well, I am the newbie in the group. This is the very first time that I got to pitch. I actually found out through Paige that this is a possibility, and was invited to submit a story idea. And I absolutely loved Mags as a character, which that's from the foundation section of the book series. And I was so intrigued by the handmaidens. And I had went back and looked through a bunch of the anthologies. And when Paige first mentioned that this might even be a possibility, I reread everything. And any of the anthologies I didn't have, I got out of the library. I was reading all this stuff. But that was sort of undiscovered country for me. And in terms of really, I hadn't seen anybody else write about it. And the prompt for this particular anthology and the title was Anything with Nothing. And so I thought, well, what describes the handmaidens better than anything with nothing? Because as described, most of them are coming to a position as handmaidens. The queen's handmaidens are basically spies within the households. And so you only end up in that situation if you can't make an advantageous marriage, or you've lost a spouse, or you've been abandoned by your family, or there's some other extenuating circumstance. So I decided that that's where I would go with it. And my story is basically about a handmaiden who has to go back home to where her abusive spouse, who's now dead, to try to salvage what's happening in that little section of Valdemar, because it's all gone to hell in a handbasket. And her feelings about, you can't go home again. Well, what happens if you have to go home again? And it's a bit of a little murder mystery, and a little bit of a Valdemar mystery. And there are heralds in it, but they're not central to the story. And, like everybody else has been saying, I had so much stinking fun playing in this world that I have loved for so long, and creating a character that fit in. And honest to goodness, I just about had a heart attack when I got the email from John Elvers saying, we'd like you to submit a story idea. And I'm like, what? We get to, yay! Honestly, I really did not think. I thought this is sort of, I'll get maybe this chance, and maybe I'll get invited again, and maybe somewhere down along the line, I'll get to do this. But then I got the email that I could pitch the story, and I was like, that's cool. Now I have to write it. And I don't know about y'all, if you remember the first time you did this, but I was so nervous. I've written a dozen books. I was so nervous writing this. Like, first of all, you're playing with somebody else's darlings. And second of all, this is one of my favorite writers. I don't want to screw this up. And so I don't think I've worried about anything nearly as much since my first publishing contract.
I was absolutely terrified. I was so scared because it was like, this is sacred ground. What am I doing here? And I don't know. It was, and then when I got the email, I thought, okay, I'm one and done. I did it. Yay, the thing. And then I got the email for the second year. I was like, oh my God, I get to do this again. And so I never count on the email coming again, but I'm always really excited when it does. So I'm
going to bow in
really lucky.
Stephanie and Diana's direction for doing it for so long, and everybody, y'all. I have enjoyed all your stories.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm in like great company because this was so cool.
I remember one year I was obsessing over like, do they have whiskey in Valdemar? And like I spent like hours trying to do research on the books, and like at the time I didn't have ebook copies. I'm like, I finally went, you know what, to heck with it. I'm just going to call it smoke wine or something and just not even try. I don't want to screw this up and like accidentally like introduce whiskey to Valdemar. I'm just going to make something. I know that they've got ice wine because I think I recall like Talia drinking it in one of the books, but like I'm not going to do this. I'm going to play it safe.
Let's be honest. I don't want to be in a world without whiskey.
Nobody does. That's why they've got smoke wine now.
I'm going to use your smoke wine if I get to write another one.
Let me make sure I called it smoke wine. Hold on.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us what you called it so we can use it if we get another invite.
Well, as part of the edits, I got 2 or 3 edits from John, and one of them I had used a word, and he's like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "See this book, page 64. See this book, page 75." He's like, "It's okay. I was just wish you used it. That's fine."
It's called smoke wine. I called it smoke wine.
Okay, it's smoke wine is going to show up in all of our stories the next time around.
Yeah,
We'll
enjoy.
see if John,
It's yours.
see if John picks it up.
Pass the bottle around.
That's right.
One of the amazing things there that happens so rarely is, you get a universe that gets created that has just this kind of impact. I mean, I remember being a teenager, picking it up, reading, blowing through a bunch of the series. Those many, many, many years ago. But it's just so rare that a series creates this kind of impact that not only does the author and the creator get to go build a shared world, but it's this impactful, it's this meaningful. So Diana, what is it to you about just the entire world that's been created?
Well, for one thing, the fact that it is an entire world. That so many fantasies have only one continent, one kingdom, and one environment, and that's flat Earth territory, and so there's all these sort of when you start digging around, and there's the, in fact, balancing of the characters who are in very constricted local environments, whereas there is a wide world out there. And I forget which one of you was Phaedra, I think. Isn't it your story where he wants to go out and see the world? Yeah. And there is in fact a world out there that he could go see. And it would be nice to actually get a caravan going somewhere and explore a little more. I've myself have tended to be more hesitant about that because I find a small little corner and work in it, but it would be nice to get out on the road there. So Misty needs to give us a little more information there. I think interesting things could be done. But what she has done is have a number of different societies, and the inclusivity, I think, is one of the very attractive features. Of course, against those people who do not want to be inclusive, and it can throw some light on contemporary issues without actually saying so, and hopefully maybe get through to people's unconscious in ways that they might resist if somebody was coming out beating a drum and waving a flag.
Stephanie, how about you? What are your thoughts on just why it's been so impactful?
Well, gosh. I would have to think about that for a long time. I mean, as a kid, I remember, I came from that. I think a lot of us, especially in fandom, come from a section that maybe weren't treated well by our peers. And Misty certainly writes stories that appeal to that section of society. And Diana called out that she was one of the early fantasy writers who wrote to the LGBTQ crowd. And that definitely appealed to me as a youth. She writes great adventure stories, and she does an incredible job at world building. That's one of the things that I feel like I could definitely learn from her is her world building is just fantastic, and it helps you to just get immersed in the world. And quite frankly, horses on the cover.
Yep.
I'm going to be honest. That's what drew me in, is a girl on a horse on the cover. And then, like those great Jody Lee covers are just phenomenal and do a great job of evoking the contents inside. But the contents inside are what keep you coming back. Mm-hmm. And there is something just really quite touching about the world. It's one of my great comfort reads. I keep going back to it. There is a sense of rightness. Things will be right in Valdemar, even if they're not right in my world right now.
Louisa?
I think the overall attraction, or what connects Valdemar with the world on a continual basis down through the years, has been kind of mentioned. Diana mentioned it in the inclusivity. And then, as Stephanie was just saying, as far as the animals and the horses, I mean, you're going to touch a young girl's heart really quickly with the horses on the cover. Right. And, spread. Yeah. And then spread on beyond young boys. They love horses too. Youth of all generations, old generation, young generation. There's something about the connection with the animals and the natural world that I think touches people's hearts and souls. The other thing that I was thinking, I had it. Yeah, there you go. is that world building. The world building is phenomenal. And then, of course, her writing is just so vivid. I will never forget Mags as a young boy in the gem mines, in those tunnels where you didn't know if you were going to live or die or find a friend who had just died. I mean, that was just so incredibly vivid that like I said, I don't know how long ago I read that when it very first came out, and it is still in my head as some of the first connections with youngsters with their companions, and the companions kind of coming in to save the day, and with what's his name now? I can't think of his name. I can picture him in Quars. He wasn't a youngster, but he was still sick. Yeah, thank you.
He's my favorite.
I think there's an overall sense of hope, and that is, even in the darkest times in Valdemar, there's that sense of hope, and the companions give that hope. And I think that's what probably touches me the most. I don't know about the rest of the world, but there you go.
Phaedra?
Well, impactful. I grew up in in South Georgia. And I think when I read this, picking The Magic's Price over the latest Sam McCaffrey book, that was like a big step for me in itself. Like, all right, I don't even know who this is, but I want to read this. And then reading on into it, and then the relationship between Vaniel and Ty Lindell, it seemed completely and utterly natural to me. It was never anything. I remember asking my mom, she picked the book up, she read parts of it, she goes, "That's very well done." And loved it. So that was that inclusion. It's that I don't know. It just made things seem very natural. So then as I grew up, it never seemed weird or wrong or odd or anything. So it's like, well, if it's in Valdemar, then it has to be real. It's just, growing up, it has to be. Like I said, there's that bit of hope. There's that, the world building in itself, everything that you could possibly dream of is in there. And it's just, I just fell in love with that whole, I don't know, just that whole concept that it is. And then my first boyfriend was gay. So it's like it sets up everything in your life. I loved it. Like I said, I don't know how that would affect other people, but that one part seems to be something that keeps rolling with everyone, even this evening that's here. But I still love reading her today. So I'll go back and reread that trilogy over and over and over again.
Jeannie?
Well, I think, everybody sort of touched on this, is that underlying thread of positivity and hope. I have a couple authors that I love their voice. I love their lyrical style. But throughout their work, there's this sense of underlying despair throughout the entire work. No matter how it ends, no matter how it begins, you just sense a heaviness in it. And one of the things about Valdemar is Missy never shies away from, there are poor people by the Trader's Gate. There are people who are reaved out kingdom and stolen away. There are people who die horribly. Vaniel does not live. And, Louisa, you're talking about things that stay so vividly in your mind. The Forest of Sorrows, the first time that's brought up, I have that so vividly in my mind. That I almost, Phaedra, you say you reread it. I almost can't reread them.
I kind of want to skip.
Yeah. And it's not that there's not prejudice, and it's not that there's not bad things that happen. It's that Misty manages to bring us that thread of hope, that thread of, yes, some people are really crap, but other people are here to lift you up and support you. And there is a found family, and there is a community where you belong, whether that's the Heralds or the Guards or the Blues or whatever it is. And I think that sense of there's a place for you. You may have to work to find it, but there's a place for you. And the whole concept, I think Diana mentioned, of that, no one true way, is really uplifting for all of us. Stephanie was saying she worked through things. There are times when, I think every book I write is working through something.
Yes.
Right. And there's something so comforting about sinking into one of the books in the Valdemar world of, there's something going on in that book overall that's going on in the world. And you can go, well, at least here, like Phaedra said, at least here, it's all right. We'll get through it. And it gives you, just like any writer would hope to do, it gets you through something. Right. So for me, that's the impact sometimes is super visual, because she creates some incredible visuals. And sometimes it's that emotional sense of, you know what, we can get through this. And sometimes it's just the found family, the sense of, yeah, but at least there.
Mm-hmm.
Paige?
All of the above. And I think what I've always really enjoyed about her work is the honesty of it. It's not just the fact that bad things happen and people still survive in one way or another. They get through these really hard things, but she doesn't shy away from anything. There's a fearlessness in her work that you don't see with a lot of writers. And she does it very simply and very directly, and she doesn't beat you over the head with things. It's just how things are. And it's honest and it's forthright. There's something about the way she puts things together that leads you down a path that changes something inside you, whether you know it or not. And she does it in such a way that you may not even realize it's happened until later on in your life. Like Phaedra was saying, when you run into something and you go, oh, okay, I know what that is. Okay, cool. It's this subtle honesty that I've always really appreciated with her work. And she does not, she doesn't take the hard things and brush them under the rug in order to make that happen. I mean, when I read the Arrow series, as a kid, I had never read anything that was so felt so true to a person being out of place and trying to find their place. And then you think you found it and then you really haven't because you still haven't worked out all your crap. And, and then horrible things happen to you, but your found family's there to make it work despite that. I mean, that series was intense at 13 or 14 or whatever I was. And yet it was completely accessible. And I think that's the power of it. That, and for a horse crazy kid with 300 briars on her shelf, horses.
Yeah, horses.
Horses.
Well,
I was horse mad growing up, and then I got a horse. And I realized this is just an animal, but the companions are everything you thought horses were before you actually met one, sort of like with men.
and I think that's a good note to end on.
Mic drop.
But before we gallop out of here, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you guys. Website, social media, and of course, what else everybody needs to pick up too. So, Jeannie?
Well, you can find me at jeanneadams.com. And the newest release is the Valdemar Anthology, which comes out on November 28th. And I know we're all very excited about that. And you can find me on most social medias under Jeanne Adams.
Paige?
I am Paige L. Christie everywhere. You got to put the L in or you end up with some famous swimmer who is not me. My series that I just finished complete, my latest series is the Legacies of Arnon. Yay, finished, no waiting. Hey. Again, the next release is Valdemar. I'm still working on my convention schedule for next year, but I will be roaming around the Southeast at various cons, and you can find me all over online.
Diana?
My website it's Diana either dash or underscore. I can never remember which. Paxon, Paxson. That's important. .com. And actually, at the moment, I'm working on a nonfiction book, a political book, but a book that I think would probably go over well in Valdemar, actually. And trying to get that done. I'm not sure what my next con will be. Probably BayCon here in California.
Bethany?
You can find me at sdiazindianeshaver.com, but mostly I'm just publishing Valdemar Anthologies at this time.
Louisa?
You can find me at Louisa Swann, SWANN.com, and on Facebook. And I'm actually sticking my toe into Instagram right now. So I'm kind of, look at that crunky nose. Look at that crunky nose page. I know I'm still stuck on Facebook, but I have a lot of friends on Facebook that I like to keep in contact with. Anyway, and I'm also on whatever they're calling Twitter, because I haven't gotten off of that yet. So yeah, I know I'm gonna probably be getting out of there as soon as I can. I just haven't had time. I haven't had time. I've been writing Valdemar stories. No, I am currently working on a brand new world, a brand new fantasy series that has got me stumped because it went from one novel to a trilogy to probably an 11 book series or more. But I'm also working on redoing some of my older steampunk books to try to bring them more in line with today's world, with the covers and things like that. Sales is important to me now. And as my husband would say, as he kicks me in the derriere. So all of the above to get the work out there. I hope that wraps that up quickly because my brain is running out of power here. On to you, Faith.
I can be found at PhaedraWeldon.com. This is, it's written right there without the space. I am still on Facebook as well, but I'm also on Substack, which I'm enjoying quite well. There's quite a big reader and writer community on Substack. I highly recommend it. I think Voldemort's the next one that's up in the list. This is going to drop. And then I have a book one for a new series called The Amaranthine, which is a continuation of a 9-book series that was known as the Eldritch Files. So this is a 5 year later, and this is where we are and coming into a whole new adventure in New Orleans with Bell Book and Candle, which I used before I even knew that series had that same book, The Good Witch. I had no idea that was the name of her store. I think that's it for now. Just going to continue and can see how far this series is going to go.
Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us, and you can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentialsworkshops.com, speculative-fiction-academy.com, creatingprose.com, and of course, your ConTinual. And we'll see you again soon. Go stack up those to-be-read piles.